All right, Nick, let's go down to Baton Rouge and talk about the LSU Tigers. I think the Tigers have done a phenomenal job in this 2024 offseason. Great recruiting classes, great transfer portal additions. I think the team is rounding out very nicely. Coach Brian Kelly really has a grasp on what he's doing. This team has been performing quite well. I think they're easily a shoo-in to make the new style of college football playoff. But let's not talk about 2024 right now. Let's jump ahead a minute and look at 2025, because if you think 2024 was good, LSU is absolutely dominating 2025 so far. Let's get into this tweet and I'll talk about it more on the other side. This is from the great Hayes Fawcett at On3 Sports. It says LSU's 2025 recruiting is off to a hot start. That is very understated in my opinion. The Tigers have landed commitments from 4 players who rank number 1 at their respective positions. Bryce Underwood is QB number 1. DeCurion Moore, wide receiver number 1. Harlem Berry is running back number 1. And Tyler Miller is interior offensive line number 1. LSU currently has the number 1 ranked class in 2025 team rankings per On3 Sports. I think this is actually crazy news, Nick. It shouldn't be possible to get 4 number 1 overall players at their respective positions. This just shows LSU is absolutely dominating recruiting, and I think this is great news for them. Curious what your thoughts are on this one, but LSU fans, let us know in the comment section below. These are 4 very good players. I'm sure they'll all be very impactful to the team, but let us know, who are you liking the most as an addition to this 2025 class? Let us know in the comment section below. But Nick, what are your thoughts on this big recruiting news for LSU?
Look, it's obviously impressive, but it's important to understand, right? If we go back a few weeks, I think everyone expected with Nick Saban retiring from Alabama, there was going to be a power vacuum in terms of recruiting in the SEC, in the SEC West, and frankly, in all of college football. Now, give some credit to Alabama and new head coach Kalen DeBoer. They've done an okay job kind of working through that tough situation, and they've done well with not based on Alabama standards, but for themselves, based on the tough expectations recruiting wise. But the vacuum that was left by Nick Saban in that area, in the recruiting department, has been filled. And it's been filled by Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers. And this report is the biggest indication of that. And I think that's the strongest indicator of success going forward, that LSU is going to be the dominant team in the SEC West. In fact, you can make an argument they're probably soon going to be the dominant team in the SEC. If you look at the next team to replace Georgia on the top of that conference, I think you're looking Baton Rouge. And the number one indicator, as always, is recruiting. We always want to talk about the transfer portal these days because everything wants to talk about, quarterback's going here to there, star receivers moving here to there, and all that kind of stuff. And it's big news and everybody gets it. But long-term success in college football is predicated on 2 things. Do you have a good head coach? We know Coach Kelly is a good coach. That's obvious, right? Proved it at Notre Dame. He's proving it at LSU. Can you recruit elite level consistently? And LSU is proving that, especially now that Alabama has taken a step back. I was curious to see what program in the SEC West, or frankly in the country, would take over that vacancy left by Alabama. I was curious, with Texas, with their money and all their dollars and their boosters and all that, would they move into that spot? Would you see a surprising team like an Auburn make a leap forward? Obviously, LSU was always in that mix, but I was kind of 50-50 if they were going to be that program, to be totally honest. But they proved that they are. And I think that is the biggest sign going forward for LSU, because once you establish being the number 1 big dog in the recruiting in your division, it all just starts to snowball from there, right? Alabama, they were bad for a decade. I think people remember that. Nick Saban comes in, starts dominating recruiting again. And once he set up that foundation, it became just so brutally hard for everybody else. That's what's happening in the SEC East now with Georgia, right? Once Georgia has now established its recruiting dominance, it's so hard for anybody else to break through. We're seeing now LSU establish that recruiting dominance. And if they continue on this trend, there won't be a team fighting for them at the top. LSU will be number 1. Everyone else will be fighting for second place. And I think that's what Coach Kelly has done. He was brought in there to do that, and he's doing a great job of executing on this plan.
Yeah, and we talk about it, and some people will take a step back and look at this and say, well, there was a power vacuum. Nick Saban left. Is up for grabs. That's easy to do. Well, that's not the case at all. You don't think you think they're just the only team to walk in there and say, hey, there's availability here. There's a fight, struggle for the top. No one has established themselves. We're just going to walk in and no one's going to fight us for it. That's not true. Every team in the SEC West SEC East, even everybody in the SEC was going for what Alabama had. Everyone was trying to be the next Alabama. So you're fighting with everybody. So it's almost even harder to recruit because everyone said, hey, let's pull out the big guns and see what we can do. There's opportunity here. We got to strike while the iron is hot. Well, LSU came out on top. So that's why it's even more impressive to me is you got to think when a power vacuum like this opens, there's a lot of angles that people are going to attack it from. And for Coach Kelly and this LSU team, this LSU staff, because I'm sure the recruiters is a big part of this as well, they come in and attack it as well as they have and start to establish such dominant position in the recruiting game. Like you said, this is going to solidify them going forward. This is what Georgia did. This is what LSU is going to do. And they're going to be very, very powerful team going on for many years to come. But just the ability for them to come in and say, hey, we see this. We know everyone else sees this. We have a better game plan than every single other team in the SEC right now, gunning to get the power vacuum that Alabama and Coach Saban has left. And then they're able to produce. You have to be pretty happy as an LSU fan. Because how many times does someone come in with a game plan, with an idea on paper, and it sounds great on paper, but it doesn't actually come to fruition? This time it did. And that is why I am so impressed with what LSU has done.
And I think one more final point to end on, and I think if you look at that list, one thing that really jumps out at me, because I know some people that have some consternation about this, they say, well, under Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, they had some great recruiting classes. True, but A&M with Jimbo Fisher, they did not build a team. They were collecting talent. It was sort of an assortment of five-star recruits. They had five-star wide receivers or something ridiculous like that. That was not a recipe for long-term success. Obviously, there's only one football to go around. That's why I love this list. You have LSU, best quarterback, right? Best running back, best interior offensive line, best wide receiver, right? You know what we call that? Building a team, not just collecting talent. So it's not just that they're recruiting at a high level, is that they're doing a phenomenal job building a team, addressing each position group and getting the best of the best at that position group. That's the important part right here to really emphasize. Again, not just collecting 5 stars or 4 stars, they're building an elite team, and that's going to be huge for them going forward.